The long-range scanner aboard the UES Pathfinder blinked to life with an unusual signal, pulling Captain Sarah Chen from her routine system check. The deep space exploration vessel had been charting the outer reaches of known space for the past 8 months, but this was different. The signal's pattern was unlike anything in their database. "Dr. Rodriguez, what do you make of this?" Chen called out to her chief science officer, who was already hunched over his console, dark eyes fixed on the scrolling data. "It's artificial, Captain. Definitely not natural background radiation," Rodriguez replied, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "But the encoding, it's using principles I'd never seen before. Incredibly sophisticated." The bridge crew fell silent as the strange signal continued its steady pulse. They were far beyond the boundaries of mapped space, in a region that humanity had only dreamed of reaching a generation ago. The Pathfinder's quantum drive had made such exploration possible, but they never expected to find signs of advanced civilization this far out. "There's something else," Rodriguez added, his voice dropping. "The signal, it's degrading. Like it's been repeating for a very long time. Years, maybe decades." Chen stood from her captain's chair, moving to study the data herself. After 20 years in deep space exploration, she learned to trust her instincts. This wasn't just another scientific curiosity. It was a cry for help. "Plot the signal's origin," she ordered, turning to her navigation officer. "And get me a full spectrum analysis. If someone's out there, they've been waiting long enough." The Pathfinder adjusted course, its massive engines humming as it carved a path through the void. As they drew closer to the signal source, their sensors began picking up more detail. A star system, unremarkable at first glance, with a handful of planets orbiting a dying red giant. But on the third planet, there were signs of civilization, or what remained of it. "Captain," Lieutenant Park called from Tactical, "I'm detecting artificial structures on the surface. Large ones, but they're in ruins. Whatever civilization built them, they've been abandoned for a long time." Chen felt a chill run down her spine. Humanity had encountered its share of ancient ruins in their expansion across the stars, but most were truly ancient, remnants of species long extinct. This was different. These ruins were relatively recent, and somewhere down there, someone was still broadcasting. "Life signs?" she asked, already knowing the answer would complicate things. "Scattered. Small populations, mostly concentrated around the larger ruins," Park confirmed. "But they're definitely still alive down there." The decision weighed heavily on Chen. First contact protocols were clear: observation only, no interference. But this wasn't a simple case of discovering a new species. This was finding survivors, possibly the last remnants of a once great civilization, calling out into the darkness for help. "Open a channel," Chen ordered, straightening her uniform. "All frequencies. Let's let them know they're not alone anymore." The response came almost immediately, a burst of data so complex it temporarily overwhelmed their communication systems. As their computers worked to decode it, images began forming on their screens. A civilization in decline, a people abandoned by their allies, a culture struggling to survive. They called themselves the Viridians. Once, they had been among the most advanced species in their region of space, renowned for their achievements in science and philosophy. But when they refused to take sides in a devastating galactic war, they were ostracized, cut off from trade and diplomatic relations. Their isolation had lasted generations, slowly draining their resources and destroying their infrastructure. The message ended with a simple plea in carefully constructed human language. "If you receive this, know that we still endure. We seek not conquest or power, but survival. Will you hear our story?" Chen looked around at her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. Humanity knew what it meant to struggle, to fight against impossible odds. They had clawed their way to the stars while older species watched and waited, expecting them to destroy themselves. Instead, they had proven that determination and compassion could go hand in hand. "Prepare a landing party," Chen announced, her voice steady, "and inform Earth Command that we've made first contact. The Viridians may have been forgotten by the rest of the galaxy, but they've found new allies now." As the Pathfinder moved into orbit, Chen couldn't help but feel that this was more than just another first contact. This was a chance to prove that humanity's place in the galaxy wasn't just about technological achievement or military might. It was about extending a hand to those in need, even when everyone else had turned away. The Viridians had survived for generations, keeping their culture and knowledge alive against all odds. Now they would learn that they weren't alone in believing that cooperation and compassion were strengths, not weaknesses. As the landing party prepared for descent, Chen knew that this meeting would change both species forever. Humanity had found not just another civilization, but a chance to demonstrate why they had risen so quickly among the stars. It wasn't their technology or their resources that set them apart. It was their unwavering belief that no one should be left behind, no matter how far away they might be. The descent to the Viridian surface was unlike anything Captain Chen had experienced in her years of space exploration. Their shuttle passed through layers of atmosphere thick with the remnants of once great environmental systems, now failing after generations of neglect. Below, the ruins of a magnificent civilization stretched to the horizon, their crystalline structures dulled by time, but still standing as testament to their builder's skill. First Officer Marcus Webb piloted the shuttle with practiced ease, but even he couldn't hide his amazement at the sight. "Those buildings," he muttered, "they're not just structures. They're machines. The whole city must have been one integrated system." "Was," corrected Dr. Rodriguez, his sensors gathering data at a furious pace. "Most of the systems are dormant now. But the engineering principles. Captain, these people were centuries ahead of us technologically, maybe more." Chen nodded, but her attention was focused on their landing zone. The Viridians had directed them to what appeared to be a public square, now serving as a community gathering place. As they descended, she could see hundreds of figures assembled below, the first clear view they'd had of the Viridians themselves. They were tall, easily 7 feet on average, with iridescent skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Their bodies were lean and graceful, adapted to their planet's lower gravity. But it was their eyes that captured Chen's attention, large, multifaceted organs that seemed to take in everything at once. The shuttle settled onto the cracked pavement with a gentle thud. "Remember," Chen addressed her team, "we're guests here. No matter what we see, no matter how much we want to help, we follow their lead." "Understood." The landing party nodded, their expressions a mix of excitement and apprehension. This wasn't just any first contact. This was contact with a species that had every reason to distrust outsiders. As they stepped out into the Viridian atmosphere, Chen was struck by the silence. Despite the hundreds gathered, there was no murmur of conversation, no shuffling of feet. The Viridians watched with their remarkable eyes, their skin colors shifting in patterns that Chen suspected conveyed meaning she couldn't yet understand. A single figure stepped forward from the crowd. Unlike the others, whose skin showed muted tones of blue and green, this one's surface rippled with deep purples and golds. When it spoke, its voice was melodious, with harmonics that seemed to resonate in Chen's chest. "I am nexus of thoughts that unite," the Viridian said in perfect, if oddly accented, English. "We have watched your approach since you entered our system. Your response to our signal was unexpected." Chen stepped forward, keeping her posture open and non-threatening. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Pathfinder. We're an exploration vessel from Earth. When we received your signal, we couldn't ignore it." "Many others did," Nexus replied, its skin darkening slightly. "For generations, our calls went unanswered. Those who once called themselves our allies turned away. Why should you, who have never known us, choose to help?" It was the question Chen had been expecting, the one that would define this entire encounter. Her answer needed to be perfect, not just diplomatic, but honest. These people had suffered too much deception to accept anything less. Because it's who we are, Chen said simply. Humanity spent thousands of years looking up at the stars, wondering if we were alone. When we finally reached them, we promised ourselves we'd never be the kind of civilization that turns its back on others in need. Nexus's skin shifted through several rapid color changes, and a ripple of similar changes moved through the crowd. Chen realized she was witnessing some form of communication, but couldn't begin to decipher its meaning. Your words are admirable, Nexus finally responded. But we have heard admirable words before. What guarantees can you offer that you will not abandon us as others did? Chen smiled slightly. No guarantees. Just this moment, right now, where we choose to help if you'll let us. Tomorrow we'll make the same choice again, and the day after that. That's how trust is built, one day at a time. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the whisper of wind through the ancient structures around them. Then, slowly, Nexus's skin began to glow with a soft, steady light that spread to those nearby. Perhaps, Nexus said, it is time we learn to trust again. Come. There is much to show you. As they followed Nexus into the city, Chen noticed details her initial survey had missed. Among the ruins, there were signs of life and adaptation. Gardens grew in unlikely places, their plants clearly engineered to thrive in the degraded soil. Makeshift power systems had been jury-rigged from salvaged technology. The Viridians hadn't just survived, they had refused to give up. Dr. Rodriguez fell into step beside her, his voice low. Captain, these people, the technological applications alone could advance human science by decades. Are we really prepared for this level of cultural exchange? Chen watched as a group of young Viridians emerged from a nearby building, their skin flickering with rapid color changes that reminded her of excited human children. I think the real question, Doctor, is are we prepared not to try? Sometimes, the greatest discoveries come not from careful planning, but from having the courage to reach out when others won't. The day stretched on as the Viridians shared their story in detail, their golden age of discovery, their principled stand against violence, their long isolation. But mixed with the history was something else. Hope. For the first time in generations, they were looking to the future instead of just surviving the present. As the Pathfinder's crew worked to establish initial aid protocols and communication systems, Chen couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. Humanity had found not just another civilization to help, but partners in building a better galaxy. One where compassion and cooperation weren't seen as weaknesses, but as the foundations of true strength. 3 weeks into the restoration efforts, Captain Chen stood in what had once been the Viridian's central archive, watching as human and Viridian engineers worked side by side to restore the ancient data systems. The cooperation between the two species had exceeded her wildest expectations, but challenges remained that no amount of goodwill could easily solve. The power grid is still unstable, Dr. Rodriguez reported, his normally composed demeanor showing signs of frustration. We've managed to reactivate some of their old energy collection systems, but the infrastructure just isn't there anymore. Every time we power up one sector, we risk overloading another. Beside him, the Viridian engineer named Harmony Through Motion Skin rippled with patterns that Chen had learned to recognize as determination mixed with concern. Our ancestors built these systems to last millennia, Harmony said, but even the most durable materials fail without maintenance. We have preserved what knowledge we could, but much has been lost. Chen had seen this pattern repeatedly over the past weeks. The Viridians' technology was incredibly advanced, but generations of isolation had created gaps in their technical knowledge. Systems that should have been routine maintenance now presented major engineering challenges. What about the atmospheric processors? Chen asked, knowing they were key to long-term survival on the planet. The Viridians had once maintained a carefully controlled climate, but their world was now subject to increasingly severe weather patterns. That's actually where we've had a breakthrough, a new voice called out. Lieutenant Kira Patel, the Pathfinder's environmental systems specialist, emerged from behind a bank of ancient machinery, her dark hair dusted with the crystalline particles that seemed to cover everything in the archives. The Viridian's original designs were incredibly sophisticated, but they're also incredibly complex. We've been trying to adapt some of Earth's simpler environmental management systems to work with their technology. Harmony's skin shifted to a deep blue of interest. Your solutions are less elegant than our traditional methods, the Viridian admitted, but they require fewer resources to maintain. We had not considered such an approach. This had been one of the most surprising discoveries of their collaboration. While the Viridian's technology was far more advanced, humanity's experience with working under resource constraints and finding innovative workarounds had proved invaluable. Where the Viridians sought perfect solutions, humans excelled at finding ways to make imperfect solutions work. The success wasn't limited to technical matters. The presence of the Pathfinder's crew had sparked a cultural renaissance among the Viridians. Young members of their society, who had grown up knowing only isolation and decline, were suddenly full of questions about the galaxy beyond their world. The human stories of exploration and discovery had awakened something that generations of survival mode had suppressed: curiosity. However, not everyone welcomed these changes. A faction of Viridian elders, led by one called Memory of Ancient Wounds, advocated for caution. They remembered the betrayal of their former allies and feared that depending too much on humanity would lead to similar pain. Captain. Commander Webb's voice came through Chen's communicator, interrupting her thoughts. We've got a situation in the agricultural sector. Some of the experimental crops aren't taking well to the soil. The local leaders are asking for you. Chen sighed. Every step forward seemed to come with new challenges. I'm on my way. She turned to Rodriguez and Harmony. Keep working on the power grid. We need those atmospheric processors online before the storm season hits. The agricultural sector was a sprawling complex of greenhouses and open fields where human agricultural experts were working with Viridian botanists to develop crops that could thrive in their world's degraded soil. As Chen approached, she could see the problem immediately. Large sections of the experimental fields had withered, the plants turning a sickly gray despite the carefully controlled conditions. The soil chemistry is more complicated than we initially thought. Dr. Sarah Wells, the Pathfinder's chief botanist, explained. The Viridians' traditional farming methods relied on a complex ecosystem that's been disrupted. Our Earth-based approaches aren't compatible with the existing mineral balance. But even as Wells spoke, Shen noticed something interesting. In one corner of the field, where some of the failed crops had been cleared, small patches of indigenous plants were beginning to grow. They weren't crops, but they were alive, adapting to the changed conditions. Look, Chen pointed out, the native species are finding a way. Maybe instead of trying to force our methods or restore the old ones, we need to develop something new, a hybrid approach that works with what's actually here now. The Viridian agricultural leader, Flow of Life Renewed, moved closer to examine the plants, their skin shifting through thoughtful patterns of green and gold. Yes, I see it now. We have been so focused on recreating what was lost, we failed to see what could be. This moment of insight sparked a new direction in their cooperation. Rather than trying to simply restore what had been lost or implement Earth-based solutions, they began developing new approaches that combined the best of both worlds. Viridian technology and human adaptability, ancient wisdom, and new innovations, all working together to forge a path forward. As the days turned to weeks, more successes followed. The power grid stabilized as they implemented a simplified version of the Viridian's original design. The atmospheric processors began to function again, using a combination of Earth-inspired mechanical systems and Viridian environmental science. Even the crops began to thrive as they developed new varieties that could flourish in the changed conditions. But perhaps most importantly, the partnership between humans and Viridians grew stronger. Each challenge they overcame together built not just practical solutions, but trust and understanding. The Viridians began to see that accepting help didn't mean losing their identity. It meant having the chance to build something new while honoring what had come before. One evening, as Chen watched the sunset paint the crystalline spires of the city in shades of purple and gold, Nexus of Thoughts, that unite joined her. "We have learned much from your people, Captain," the Viridian leader said quietly. "Not just about technology or survival, but about hope. You have shown us that there is strength in reaching out, in being willing to change while remaining true to who you are." Chen smiled, understanding the weight of those words. "We've learned just as much from you. Sometimes, the greatest wisdom isn't in knowing how to build something, but in knowing how to rebuild, how to take what's broken and make it into something new and beautiful." As night fell over the recovering world, lights began to flicker on in the city below. Not just emergency lighting now, but homes and workshops where two species worked together to forge a future neither could have imagined alone. It was just the beginning, but it was a beginning full of promise. The message from Earth Command arrived just as Captain Chen was finishing her daily briefing with the Viridian Leadership Council. Her communication officer's expression told her everything she needed to know before she even read the content. "Word has spread," Commander Webb said quietly as they walked through the crystalline corridors of the newly restored archive building. "The galactic community has noticed our presence here. Several major powers are demanding explanations." Chen had known this day would come. The galaxy was vast, but news had a way of traveling, especially when it involved a supposedly dead civilization coming back to life with the help of humanity. The galaxy's youngest spacefaring species. "How bad is it?" she asked, though she could guess from Webb's tense posture. "The Arcturus Confederation is particularly vocal. They're claiming we violated territorial boundaries that were established during the war. The same war the Viridians refused to participate in." Webb handed her a datapad. "But they're not the only ones. The Stellar Conclave wants to send observers to ensure we're not providing military technology." Chen felt a familiar tension headache building. The Viridians had warned them about this, about how the old powers would react when they learned of their resurgence. But the speed and intensity of the response was concerning. "Captain," a melodious voice called out. Nexus of Thoughts, that unite approached, their skin shifting through patterns that Chen had learned to recognize as concern mixed with resolve. "We have received communications as well. Our former allies wish to re-establish diplomatic relations." After all this time, Chen couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "What changed?" "You did." Nexus's skin rippled with colors that suggested both amusement and bitterness. "Or rather, humanity's involvement changed the equation. They fear what we might become with your help. Some seek to prevent it. Others wish to control it. None truly care about our welfare." The implications were clear. The galaxy's major powers had been content to let the Viridians fade into obscurity when they thought them helpless. But now, with humanity helping them rebuild, they suddenly represented a potential threat or opportunity. A junior officer hurried up to them, tablet in hand. "Captain, we're picking up multiple ships entering the system. They're maintaining distance, but they're definitely watching us." Chen shared a look with Nexus. They had discussed this possibility, but having it actually happen was another matter entirely. The Viridians' isolation was truly over, for better or worse. "What do you want to do?" Chen asked Nexus. "This is your world, your choice." Nexus's skin shifted through deep, thoughtful patterns before settling into the bold colors of determination. "We will not hide. Not anymore. But neither will we return to the old ways. Humanity has shown us a different path, one of genuine cooperation rather than political maneuvering." Over the next few days, the situation grew more complex. Diplomatic vessels from various powers requested permission to land. Trade delegations suddenly discovered urgent reasons to visit this formerly forgotten world. Each arrival brought with them offers of aid, technological exchange, and political alliance, all with strings attached. But the Viridians were not the same people who had been abandoned generations ago. Their partnership with humanity had taught them more than just how to rebuild their world. It had taught them how to stand up for themselves while remaining true to their principles. They expect us to be desperate. Memory of ancient wounds observed during a council meeting. The elder Viridian's skin flickered with colors of grim satisfaction. They think we will grasp at any offer of help, as we once did. They do not understand what has changed. Chen watched as the Viridian leadership calmly but firmly rejected offers that would have compromised their independence. They accepted only those delegations that showed genuine respect for their sovereignty and their partnership with humanity. The humans, for their part, stood firmly beside their allies. When the Arcturus Confederation threatened trade sanctions against Earth for its interference, humanity's response was clear. They would not abandon their friends. It's interesting. Dr. Rodriguez noted one evening as they watched another delegation depart in obvious frustration. They keep trying to understand this in terms of traditional power politics. They can't grasp that we're not here to exploit the Viridians' technology or use them as proxies in some galactic power play. That's because they're still playing the same old games, Chen replied. They don't understand that sometimes helping others isn't about gaining an advantage. It's about doing what's right. The turning point came when the Viridians, with human support, presented their case to the Galactic Council. They didn't ask for recognition or aid. Instead, they demonstrated what they had achieved through genuine cooperation. New technologies that combine Viridian sophistication with human ingenuity, environmental restoration techniques that could help other struggling worlds, and most importantly, a model for how different species could work together as equals. We stand before you not as supplicants, Nexus declared to the assembled representatives, their skin glowing with quiet pride, but as proof that there is another way. Humanity reached out to us, not because we were powerful, but because we were in need. They helped us not to gain advantage, but because they believed it was right. And in doing so, they showed us, and now you, that true strength lies not in domination, but in cooperation. The speech sent shockwaves through galactic political circles. Some dismissed it as naive idealism, but others began to take notice. Younger species, particularly those who had felt pressured by the traditional powers, began reaching out to both humanity and the Viridians. As Chen watched these developments unfold, she realized that they had accomplished something far greater than just saving one civilization. They had demonstrated an alternative to the cynical power politics that had dominated galactic relations for millennia. We're going to face opposition, Webb warned during a strategy session. The old powers won't give up their influence easily. Good, Chen replied with a slight smile. That means we're changing things that need to be changed. As the sun set on another day on the Viridian world, now bustling with activity and new construction, Chen stood with Nexus watching ships come and go from the restored spaceport. Some were human vessels bringing supplies and expertise. Others were diplomatic missions from various worlds, some hostile, some curious, some hopeful. Was it worth it? Nexus asked suddenly. All the diplomatic complications, the threats, the opposition. Chen thought about the flourishing gardens, the restored buildings, the young Viridians working alongside human scientists with their skin glowing with excitement and curiosity. She thought about the messages she'd received from other isolated or struggling species, asking if humanity's offer of help extended to them as well. Every bit of it, she replied firmly. Because sometimes doing the right thing isn't just about helping one people or solving one problem. Sometimes it's about showing the whole galaxy that there's a better way. 1 year after the UES Pathfinder first detected the Viridian signal, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the newly completed Galactic Assembly Hall on the Viridian homeworld. The crystalline structure seamlessly blended Viridian architectural principles with human engineering, creating something entirely new, much like the alliance it represented. Representatives from 24 species filled the chamber, some from the old powers, others from emerging civilizations. They had come to witness something unprecedented. The formal announcement of the Cooperative Initiative, a new approach to galactic relations spearheaded by humanity and the Viridians. "It's quite a sight," Commander Webb remarked, standing beside her. "Did you ever think we'd end up here when we first picked up that signal?" Chen watched as Nexus of Thoughts that unite conversed with delegates from various worlds, their skin displaying the confident patterns of a leader who had found their purpose. "No," she admitted, "but sometimes the most important journeys are the ones we never planned." The past year had transformed both species. The Viridians had rediscovered their confidence and purpose, while humanity had gained insights into advanced technology and ancient wisdom. But more importantly, they had proven that genuine cooperation between species wasn't just possible, it was powerful. "The atmospheric processors are at full capacity," Dr. Rodriguez reported, approaching with a tablet displaying real-time data. "The Viridian-human hybrid systems are actually performing better than the original designs. 3 other worlds have already requested the specifications." This was just one example of what they had achieved together. By combining Viridian sophistication with human adaptability, they had created solutions that neither species could have developed alone. The restored planet was proof of what could be accomplished when advanced technology met innovative thinking. Harmony Through Motion, now the head of the Joint Technological Exchange Program, joined their group. "The first educational exchange groups are ready to begin," they announced, their skin showing excitement. "Young Viridians will study on Earth, while human students will learn here. We are already receiving applications from other species as well." The chamber grew quiet as Nexus took the central platform. Behind them stood a diverse group of representatives, human, Viridian, and others who had joined their initiative. Their presence represented a fundamental shift in how species could interact. For generations, Nexus began, their voice carrying clearly through the hall. "We believed that isolation was the price of maintaining our principles. We watched as the galaxy tore itself apart in conflicts, thinking that by standing apart we could remain pure. We were wrong." Their skin shifted to deep, thoughtful colors as they continued. "When humanity found us, we learned that true principles are not maintained by hiding from challenges, but by facing them with courage and compassion. They showed us that reaching out to others isn't a sign of weakness, but the highest form of strength." Captain Chen stepped forward to join them, representing Earth. "A year ago, we found a civilization that many had forgotten. What we discovered was not just a people in need, but partners in building a better future. The cooperative initiative isn't about one species helping another. It's about all of us rising together." The announcement that followed changed the course of galactic history. The initiative would provide support to struggling civilizations, share technological and cultural exchanges, and promote peaceful cooperation. But unlike the old power structures, membership would be based on commitment to mutual aid rather than military or economic might. Not everyone welcomed these changes. The traditional powers saw their influence beginning to wane as younger species were drawn to this new model of interaction. Some tried to undermine the initiative through political pressure or economic threats, but the results spoke for themselves. Worlds that had been struggling with environmental collapse began to recover using Viridian human restoration techniques. Species that had been marginalized found new opportunities through the initiative's exchange programs. The galaxy was changing, one connection at a time. Memory of ancient wounds, who had once been skeptical of human involvement, now served as an advisor to new members of the initiative. "We learned that true strength lies not in standing alone," they observed, their skin showing the complex patterns of hard-won wisdom, but in knowing when to stand together. As the assembly concluded, Chen found herself in the archive room where their work had begun a year ago. The old data systems were fully restored now, but they held more than just Viridian knowledge. They contained the story of how 2 species from different ends of the galaxy had found each other and changed everything. "What comes next?" Webb asked, joining her in the archive. Chen smiled, watching through the crystal walls as ships from dozens of worlds moved through the evening sky. "We keep building. We keep reaching out. There are still so many out there who need to know they're not alone." Nexus approached them, their skin glowing with the warm colors of friendship. "The galaxy is changing," they said. Others are beginning to see what we discovered. That true civilization is measured not by how much power we hold, but by how we use it to help others. The initiative would face challenges in the years to come. Change never comes easily, especially to systems that have existed for millennia. But they had proven that there was another way, a path that led not to dominance, but to genuine cooperation and mutual growth. As the stars appeared in the Viridian sky, Chen thought about the long chain of events that had brought them here. A signal in the darkness, a choice to help, a belief that doing what was right mattered more than playing it safe. Sometimes the greatest achievements weren't the ones you could measure or build, but the moments when you chose to reach out instead of turning away. "We have a saying on Earth," Chen told Nexus as they watched the gathering of ships above. "A rising tide lifts all boats." Nexus's skin shimmed with understanding. "Yes, we rise together, or not at all."